It was just after I finished writing the script for this video that I was watching an episode of CJ the X's podcast, Data Breach. They were talking to Professor C.Ty Nguyen, a philosophy professor at the University of Utah, and I heard a sentence that summarised the ideas I wanted to talk about in this video so perfectly and so eloquently. I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but Professor Nguyen said,
"Games are often a structure designed to crystallize freedom."
People don't understand the beauty of games because they keep trying to make it like a movie. They keep pointing to the fixed qualities, or what games are they're action sculptures.
Let's talk about games, art, and ultimately, Minecraft. That's not the only thing I want to do though. What you're seeing right now isn't just random gameplay footage. This is the start of a world tour, my Minecraft world. I want to show you all the different areas of my 3-year-old survival world. I think that telling you about my world is going to be a lot more insightful if we want to learn about what makes Minecraft so great than spending 20 minutes reading facts off of Wikipedia or fandom. I've put more hours into this place than I could count, and it's really served as a sort of digital home. I hope this tour will be stimulating enough to maintain your dwindling attention while we talk about games and talk about art. Minecraft just isn't a game that needs an introduction. It's been ever present for over a decade now, and it's been incredibly influential. It basically created the sandbox genre. Even saying that is kind of simplifying it though. Minecraft has a sentimental place in our culture. There are so many videos on here of people talking wistfully about what Minecraft has meant to them. That is clearly special to us. But what exactly makes it so special? And why isn't it treated with the same respect and reverence that's given to the greats of other mediums? Important works of literature or movies that were foundational in their medium and influenced everything we enjoy today. And you can't argue that Minecraft hasn't been incredibly influential. You might flinch at that and wonder how this block game is somehow unequal to the likes of The Godfather or Wuthering Heights. But why not? Why don't we talk about games this way? Why aren't games art? Minecraft first gained popularity in 2009 with the release of Alpha. There are obviously versions even earlier, but this is in my opinion where the game we now know starts to appear. I won't pretend to have been around to experience these older versions, but I have lived them vicariously through mods and the first console editions, which resembled beta in a lot of ways. I started playing around release version 1.1 in 2012, and I still remember getting excited that apples would start falling from trees. One of my favourite things from this era of the game was the trailers made by Hat Films. They were well made but had an amateur charm to them.
We're excited to announce a brand new update coming to Minecraft today.
Woo!
Did you know that Jep from Mojang has been making weekly snapshots of the game?
Yeah.
Minecraft was immediately fascinating to so many people because it essentially introduced the idea of a true freedom in games. Before this, we had games that elicited the feelings of freedom through intricately simulated worlds or deeply immersive experiences. But they were essentially facades when compared to a true sandbox like Minecraft. It really was revolutionary to be able to control and manipulate every piece of the world, break every block, and have the power and opportunity to put it back together however you saw fit. There's still a charm to these early days of Minecraft, especially when the game took the leap to beta. Buildings are limited and simplistic, creating an artistic ceiling that equalized the playing field, and allowed everyone to feel like an artist. A feeling that's much harder to grasp today with Pinterest builds and SMPs like Hermitcraft. This artistic expression was a core reason the game was so beloved, even in its early years with its simplified palette. Minecraft gave people a simple and accessible creative outlet and a judgment-free environment to create. By expanding on that freedom with years of added blocks and environments, Minecraft has graduated from a creative experiment to an artistic medium in its own right. Through its gameplay, unintentionally or not, Minecraft has something to say. Minecraft is a game about autonomy, about the human experience, and about creativity. You might think I'm stretching, but I think the truth is, we're just not used to finding meaning through gameplay. I'll give you an example later in the video with Celeste, a game that conveys meaning through its narrative and its gameplay. But I've gotten way ahead of myself. To understand why video games are art, and why Minecraft is the best game of all time, we have to understand why we play games in the first place. When I first started planning this video, I wanted my world tour to be chronological, starting with the first things I built and slowly showing how my world progressed over time. But I quickly realised that wasn't going to be possible. This building you're seeing right now was my starter base. It used to be full of chests and furnaces, and you can still see my enchanting setup, positioned outside like some kind of modern art piece. When I built this modern house, this island was the only thing here. But now, to get here, I had to walk past so many buildings that it kind of spoils that chronological order. I think I love that though. I started this world in 2023, a little while before I first remembered hearing the term Forever World, but I think that is the best way to describe this place. I've come and gone from it over the past 3 years and added things that are inconsistent and layered, but I like how that mirrors real-world history. When we play Minecraft or make anything, we put a little piece of ourselves in stasis. And when I walk around this world, I get to see those pieces, sitting right alongside each other. When I was building this house, I was going through an intense Beatles phase, and I can't look at this place without thinking about them or remembering the smell of elderflower for some reason. It's crazy how memories can get entangled like that. This is also where one of my first dogs lives, Oliver. Pets in Minecraft are actually so meaningful to me. I have a big list of pets in my world that you'll see over the course of the video. They have accompanied me at different times over the past 3 years. Oh, and you can also see this horse with no name that has stood in this exact spot for some reason the entire time. I'm a very sentimental person, as you'll probably figure out over the course of this video, and Minecraft pets are one of the things that really stuck with me. I don't think this is uncommon either, as I've seen plenty of nostalgic posts about early Minecraft dogs. I feel like they evoked a feeling of remote companionship. So why do we play games? I've heard this question explored before, but it's usually not with the same esteem or respect given to the questions of why we read or why we watch movies. A common theme with those two mediums is empathy. We watch movies because we get to see the world through someone else's eyes. It allows us to learn and connect. When it comes to games, it's usually a more utilitarian view. We play games to compete and gain skills. But there's more to it than that, right? I think it's a positive instinct for people who love games to cling to the benefits of the medium. But we don't just read great books to improve, unless you're talking about Atomic Habits or some Jordan Peterson slop. To be more specific, let's talk about the 3 pillars of games. I'm sure these are concepts that have been discussed elsewhere, but I want to clarify the 3 things that I think define the medium of games. The 3 pillars of games are narrative, visuals, and interaction, or what are sometimes called gameplay. I think these pillars are somewhat self-explanatory, but let's go over them quickly. Narrative is present in other mediums, but narrative can be expressed uniquely in games, and I think it's worth exploring what makes narrative in games different before we move on to the other pillars. On one hand, you have games with a more traditional linear narrative, like anything Naughty Dog makes. But even then, we often take for granted the unique narrative delivery of only partially scripted conversation and optional side quests. On the other hand, we have role-playing games, where the player starts to play with the narrative, blurring the lines between our narrative and interaction pillars. Role-playing games can be defined as games where narrative is the gameplay. In these games, narrative is not only something we experience, but that we get to shape. In games like Fallout or Disco Elysium, we feel like we're part of the story being told and have agency over it, even if behind the curtain there's only a limited tree of possibilities. Our second pillar is visuals. This is anything you see in a game, which can be broken down further into the categories of art style and graphics. This too can be influenced by a player's interaction. Both narrative and visuals could fill their own videos, or really their own channels, and I'm not qualified to tell you anything about art style, so I'm going to move on quickly to our final pillar. Interaction. This is what I really want to talk about, because this is the pillar unique to games, our play. If I had to reduce this video to one argument, it would be this. When trying to define the best of games, we should focus more on the things that make games unique. We should celebrate games that elevate this pillar, games like Minecraft, Mario, Overwatch, Beat Saber, or Balatro. I think at a fundamental level, play is about interaction. It's about exploring emotions, not through empathy, but through experience. Maybe that experience is just fun or exhilarating, but maybe it's weird and eerie, or maybe it's challenging somehow, teaching us something about ourselves, even if we don't realize it. This is the one space in my world that I've spent the most time in. I didn't plan to, it's a storage room, but I've always found that Minecraft is a sandbox game first and an inventory manager second. I always find that whenever I build a centralized storage room, it just kind of becomes the center of the world. It's the one place that you always return to. There's a lot of discussion about Minecraft's soundtrack. C418's original music for the game is beloved for good reason, and I love the more recent music too. I think a key part of what makes Minecraft's music great is how it plays. The tracks fade in at what seems like random intervals with lots of time in between to feel their absence. Although I love the music of the game, what I really love to listen to is the soundscape, which I improve through client-side mods like Sound Physics Remastered and Ambient Sounds. I really recommend the mod just called Sounds. I love being able to spend time in my builds and hear the sound of footsteps on cobblestones, rain hitting a copper roof, or birds singing in the distance. I keep a wither rose on this hill as a way of marking my wither fight. This was the hill that I would use as a viewing spot for my base. I would climb up onto the top of this cherry tree, and the sounds of the jungle would go silent, and I would look over the island with my render distance of 12. I always memorialised my pets, and buried nearby is my first horse, Dublin, who survived that wither fight, just to get stuck on this wither rose and slowly die. So if video games are a natural continuation of prior mediums with the addition of interaction, why are they generally treated as a lower art form than their predecessors? In 2012, film critic Roger Ebert said, "Video games can never be art."
And we're set up for a game of something called
tennis.
Super tennis. Now, okay.
All right, I'm going to start serving.
You are?
Yeah, return it.
Okay.
I should start this section out by admitting that I'm not really going to be arguing this fairly, because I do think that all mediums are art. I think any medium that allows people to experience things and feel things can and eventually will produce great art. PageMail made an amazing video called Be Your Own Algorithm that touches on this topic, discussing short form content, one of the newest and most maligned video mediums. They also just released an amazing video called The New Americana that you should totally watch after you finish this one. I think it's helpful to remember that so many mediums we consider worthy now had to start somewhere and were originally considered low art. The most common example being Shakespeare. His plays are widely considered great and important works, but in his times they were accessible to the masses and therefore considered low art. Time does two things. It muddies our perspectives, which gives things weight whether or not they deserve it. It also gives things room to grow, to mature. Maybe the reason video games aren't respected is that we're just too early to this question. Perhaps in 50 years' time, figures with the same cultural position Ebert held will find it self-evident that video games are art, or even high art. I want to give you that example I promised earlier. Celeste is an indie platformer game by Maddie Thorson about climbing a mountain, baking strawberry pie, and dying a lot. The game is made up of fast-paced and difficult challenges. It's a game that encourages you to die repeatedly but respawn fast and keep trying. The central narrative of the game is that your character Madeline is trying to climb a mountain. There's a lot more narrative involved exploring ideas of mental health, but the gameplay alone does tell us something. The first real level of Celeste is probably my favourite. This is where you start to scale the mountain and climb through falling ice and ancient machinery. I actually tried speedrunning this level for a while, and I got pretty fast, but it took so long that I never even considered trying to run the rest of the game. The themes of Celeste are already present in its first level. As simple as it sounds, trying to make this jump and failing until you make it, respawning right there with no delay, is the game. Celeste, to me, is about perseverance. It's about experiencing something hard and throwing yourself at it until you come out on top, without letting failure turn you around. Would Celeste still be a great game if its gameplay loop didn't form a metaphor for its narrative? Probably. But that's also part of what makes it so great, and so worthy of analysis. It's so common for game analysis to slip into imitating film analysis by focusing entirely on narrative or visuals. Think of how when conversations of the best games so often focus on games like The Last of Us, which imitate conventional Hollywood storytelling. In Ebert's essay, he can't seem to grasp the inherent value of a game. Using the game Braid as an example, he discusses its themes of turning back time to explore how we view our past and deal with our mistakes. I haven't played Braid, so I can't comment on his interpretation, but his immediate dismissal of the central interactive metaphor of the game, simply by saying, quote, "Nor am I persuaded that I can learn about my own past by taking back mistakes in a video game," shows a lack of any attempt to appreciate games outside of the limited perspective of a film critic. Ebert digs into Braid, desperate to compare its composition to prose or to cinema, but fails to appreciate its central narrative metaphor, and therefore fails to appreciate the unique depth of not only witnessing this metaphor, but being the one to enact it. Ultimately, Ebert simply can't see games past exercises in reaching a goal, a win state, what we might consider the definition of a traditional game. But if we take a second to think of what we really mean when we talk about games, we mean a whole lot more than just A to B. Just like how a novel is more than a collection of words, Video games are an entire medium that can be open-ended, creative, or just spaces to exist in, all while meeting the criteria of a game. Ebert challenges us repeatedly by saying that no one in or out of the field has ever been able to cite a game worthy of comparison with the great poets, filmmakers, and novelists. But I think we can. It's time we finally get back to talking about Minecraft. My bookshop, which you're seeing right now, is one of my favourite builds. I spent a lot of time detailing every single angle, except that once you reach the first floor, you'll realise it's actually very unfinished. I have a bad habit of carefully constructing the exterior of a building and then leaving the inside barren, and I don't actually think that's an uncommon experience in Minecraft. I have two theories for why this might be. Firstly, Minecraft's a block game, so most of the materials we have to work with are big, which is good for walls, floors, and roofs, but not so much for intricate furniture items. Players will often stretch the game's palette to its imaginative limits by using tripwire hooks as taps or sea pickles as something. The second reason is something we'll talk about in more detail later: the fact that Minecraft relies a lot on intrinsic motivation for building. This is the idea that there's nothing in the gameplay directly motivating you to build a place, unless you're playing modded, and that you're doing it for its own sake. This intrinsic gameplay is great, but if your buildings have no real reason to have interiors for gameplay, then what pushes you to decorate them? A lot of people avoid this issue by focusing partly or entirely on extrinsic farm builds. When I was planning this build, I found myself thinking about its architecture when I was walking around my city. I was looking for windows, doorways, and chimneys, and trying to fit those shapes into the game. It's amazing how many things you start to notice when you train your eyes to see them. A few years ago, I started learning to identify birds that live around me, and it quickly became an obsession. I started with magpies, which are still my favourite birds, and crows, trying to bribe them into being my friends. I also fell in love with garden birds like greenfinches and long-tailed tits. I got into bird photography too, and that was all from learning to pay attention to the world around me. I really recommend reading the book How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell if you want to learn how and why you should pay attention to the natural world around you. When I was writing this script, I was getting really into identifying trees, but as I'm recording this voiceover, I'm currently obsessed with mosses. So, why Minecraft? Minecraft is the purest expression of our third pillar, interaction, or gameplay. The pillar that's unique to games. So how does it do that? Minecraft is, in many ways, pure game. Sure, it has narrative. And I don't just mean the narrative of fighting the Ender Dragon or whatever. I could easily go on a tangent about Minecraft's progression and how it's the biggest weakness compared to games like Terraria, which is what Minecraft would be like if it cared a lot more about narrative and a lot less about sandbox. Minecraft's real narrative is about the player. It's your story, which is something we all seem to understand, but tend to forget in favour of the baked-in story of blaze rods, eyes of ender, and dragon fights, which end up becoming fodder for a key jangling movie plot. I actually watched the Minecraft movie for the making of this video, because I wanted to make sure I could actually say I had watched it, and oh my god, it was so much worse than I expected. I'm sort of the target demographic for this film as someone who is obsessed with Minecraft, and will at least somewhat enjoy that key jangling, even if I'm not the real demographic, a child. The one thing I couldn't get out of my head while watching a Minecraft movie was the title of a Guardian review by Peter Bradshaw for the new Mario Galaxy movie. They described the film as, quote, worse than AI. I know that movie review titles are essentially an arms race to the bottom of the most incendiary Twitter drama-worthy sentences, but this one still stuck with me, like it did for many others. We've been so inundated with AI slop over the past few years that it's become our touchstone for bland, unchallenging media. But the Mario movie and the Minecraft movie before it were reminders that slop has always been here. One of my personal video essay pet peeves is when 90% of videos conclude with AI. I am truly at AI burnout, and I think I could have said that a few weeks into the rise of diffusion models and Will Smith eating spaghetti. It didn't help that even before ChatGPT, I was plugged into that world, having worked on what seems like prehistoric machine learning models for a few years at that point. Don't take this to assume I'm some AI lover or even centrist though. I'm not a fan of generative AI or the many ways AI accelerates our lack of digital privacy. I'm skeptical of some of the climate claims though. Alexander Avila has 2 fantastic videos on AI that I will admit shaped my opinions heavily. I think one of the reasons that video essays concluding with AI gets on my nerves is that it often isn't explored with any real depth or understanding. Progressive people on the internet, despite being right about everything, can really bandwagon opinions a lot, and that's not always in the interest of truth. When we talk about AI without context, it often lets institutions and systems that have been doing damage to creative fields and data privacy somewhat off the hook. AI is stealing from artists, but so is our rigid copyright system and economy that makes art next to impossible to take seriously for most people. As much as I would love to solve the problems AI poses in an instant, I remember a world before AI. It really wasn't that long ago, and these problems were still very present. Anyway, I was talking about the Minecraft movie. My favourite parts of the Minecraft movie were the parts that weren't actually anything to do with Minecraft. Almost as if the office room of 28 writers that worked on this film were actually able to create something moderately palatable when set in a blandly familiar environment. Despite the cast being overfilled, I did enjoy some of Jason Momoa's and Jack Black's performances, and the two did have fun chemistry. Unfortunately, I just can't say the same for anyone else, except my beloved General Chungus, obviously. Once we get into the world of Minecraft, the film replaces any attempt at interesting writing in favour of the aforementioned key jangling. After the halfway mark, I started to zone out of the movie. The excitement of hearing infamous lines like flint and steel or I yearn for the mines started to fade, and even hearing chicken jockey could do nothing to wake me up. The final scenes especially were excruciatingly dull, and felt like third acts I'd seen 100 times in Marvel movies. The obsessive Minecraft lover in me hoped for something more akin to the first Mario movie, a well-animated film in the style of Minecraft trailers with more tailored keys to jangle. But I think a Minecraft movie could have aimed for so much more. The whole point of this video is that Minecraft has something to say, and a movie could have doubled down on that by exploring themes of creativity and immersion, or even just used the game to explore completely other themes. But instead, we got neither. Putting the Minecraft movie aside and returning to our pillars, we get to Minecraft's visuals, which are also great. They're iconic. The only pixelated graphics in a 3-dimensional game like Minecraft that come to mind were the unintentional but iconic styles of the PS2. I think Minecraft's visuals were striking and memorable from the start, but they've only improved over time. I'm not sure I would describe the texture updates as controversial, but I've seen a number of people reminiscing over the older and rougher textures. The overall visual language of Minecraft has changed a lot over time. Players will still overwhelmingly find themselves spawning in plains biomes or forests, but they'll also be looking at mountains, glaciers, mesas, cherry forests, basalt deltas, warped forests, bees, goats, and even sniffers, I guess. Maybe some of these additions haven't lodged themselves as deeply into our cultural consciousness as the Creeper or the Enderman, but they undeniably continue Minecraft's unique design language, even if additions like increased animations or friendly ghasts stretch at its boundaries. But we aren't really here to talk about Minecraft's narrative, or Minecraft's visual design. We're here to talk about its gameplay. And the one thing that defines Minecraft's gameplay is its freedom. Freedom is one of the 3 things I think make Minecraft unique, since apparently I love breaking things into 3s. The other 2 things are creation and immersion, which will get their own chapters later on. I said earlier that Minecraft is about autonomy, and by extension, freedom. So let me expand on that. By stretching the freedom handed to players by video games to its logical conclusion, Minecraft became an exploration of autonomy, what we enjoy about freedom, and what we choose to do with freedom when it's truly unlimited. Video games rely on the player feeling like they're in control. As far back as Pong or Pac-Man, the joy of games was feeling that you were in control, and that control was what led you to winning. These very early and simplistic games really did give you full control. There were no soft, squishy boundaries, just a concrete arcade logic that allowed the player to freely move around and control a small playing area. Once we start looking at later games though, we start to see players lose that full control. As games start to aim for greater autonomy, the player antithetically started losing control. All of a sudden, these environments were more complex, which led to softer boundaries, more capable of strange physics collisions and no clipping. Rather than honest hard-coded blue pixel walls, We started to get environments that wanted to look real, or at least as real as possible on old hardware. This unreality meant that player control was swapped for a prettier facade. Okay, so our most immersive games are now built on a foundation of restricted player freedom. But what if we got rid of that restriction? What if our simulated world is completely available and completely malleable? What would that be like? Well, it would be Minecraft. This is what I mean when I say that Minecraft is about freedom and what we choose to do with it. Every single person who plays Minecraft has a different, completely unique outcome from their play. Everyone's world says something different about them. When you have true freedom, what do you build? Where do you go? Who are you? I love to create a sprawling, chaotic space. Each build and each space speaks to something about me, a fixation I had at a given time, or a desire for somewhere cozy, or a fascination with the scale and worlds of David Lynch. I think one of the most interesting case studies of how people explore and deal with complete freedom and how that compares to the real world is in player-controlled economies. ThoughtSlime has a great video on this topic, but I also want to talk about Hermitcraft, diamonds, and fiat-backed nether stars. Any attempt at economy eventually comes into conflict with the fact of Minecraft's aforementioned total freedom. The most obvious form of currency, diamonds, is still one of the most optimal choices, because nearly everything in the game in some form is grindable. Be it fully automatic farms, villager trading halls, or just a Fortune 3 pickaxe. The first thing that comes to mind when I think of Minecraft economies is Hermitcraft, which I think acts as a great example of the impossibility of a real economy in the game, because the Hermitcraft economy is mostly just an act. A very fun and satisfying act that is great at creating stories, but still an act. In truth, it's almost always easier to either farm something for yourself or share freely due to the abundant nature of the game's infinite environment and renewable resources. So we come back to freedom. What do we do when given total freedom or a post-scarcity economy? We share. Even if Hermitcraft or your own personal server decided to try using KCJ's fascinating currency based loosely on the logic of our world, you would still eventually find that the most convenient action would be the revolutionary act of sharing. So if Minecraft is about freedom, what is it about freedom that speaks to us? This is my industrial district so far. I don't build a lot of farms. I like to design them myself where possible, and I like a little manual input, so there isn't much here at the moment. I still like this area though. There's something appealing about its sterility. This mod farm was based on this tutorial, but I decided to build it mostly from tinted glass. I have 2 different amethyst geodes around my base that I would climb down to one after the other, the budding crystal blocks hanging in midair for me to repeatedly harvest. My favourite Minecrafter is Etho, and I know he would have used this as an excuse to build some fancy timed piston collection system, but I think I liked the process of mining the amethyst by hand. My other tower is a farm only in the most literal sense. There is no automation, but its layout is quick and efficient. I think this tower speaks to the fact that I don't like things to be too automated, because if there's no player interaction required, there becomes no reason for the player to spend more than a second in a place to grab items from a chest. I think this is a good time to talk about my railway system that you'll already have seen me use once or twice. I don't think I would call a railway system a single build exactly, but if it was, it would be my favourite one. I'm quite proud of this network, and it really scratches a part of my brain, even if using my Elytra is almost always a better option. I have a massive collection of screenshots that I've taken over the past 3 years documenting the progress of the world, which is very helpful, since I genuinely can't remember how or why the railway started. At first, the railway was just connecting my storage base to the temple, which later became a big interchange, but it expanded in every direction, going through the nether and to the end. If I remember to, I'll put on the screen my tube-style map that I made to show all the stations and all the lines. I started a new job this year, after spending a lot of time at home. It was difficult, and I struggled a lot. But after a while, I was proud of myself for sticking with it. I know that for a lot of people that might not sound like a lot, but I was struggling to go outside at all. I was struggling to talk to people, and now, all of a sudden, I had to spend all day around people in an environment that I wasn't in control of. I quite literally did not have autonomy anymore. Once I got over the first hurdles of working and settled into a routine, I started to feel like my time wasn't my own. I would feel frustrated that large chunks of my days, and therefore my life, would be spent in a workplace. I would count my minutes to scrape back whatever time for myself I could, or at least find ways to listen to audiobooks or podcasts while I was working, to make that time feel a little bit more my own. The truth was, though, my time wasn't my own anymore. I was selling my time. I think this transaction is taken for granted by a lot of people. Work is important for society and often even for mental health. But I think everyone has had jobs that were more about ticking a box and waiting out a clock than really achieving anything. And even work that is important, is rewarding, can take away your autonomy and often take advantage of your dedication. So if so many of us are used to our autonomy being taken away on a daily basis, how does Minecraft play into that? My Minecraft world and my project were one of the things that kept me going through work days that melted together. I could mindlessly go about my work, knowing that at the end of the day, I could do something I was in control of. Having a world where I could do whatever I wanted was freeing. It was an expression of my autonomy. I was in charge of planning, designing, and executing an entire rail network. I got to put together a castle exactly how I wanted, and I got to inhabit those spaces. Minecraft was a remedy for my lack of autonomy. Now this is the part of the essay where I'm going to start to tell you why this is actually all about capitalism. And I'm not going to make some self-conscious video essayist apology for that, because it's just true. Capitalism is the root cause of, or exacerbating, almost all of our struggles. It's our economic system, and it's the bedrock of our inequities. I want to link the ideas of video games we've been exploring as a remedy to our desire for autonomy to Mark Fisher's idea of capitalist realism. I read Capitalist Realism for the first time recently, having put it off for a very long time, and realised why it was so popular. Mark Fisher, in this book and his other works, is very talented at communicating complex ideas in an accessible way. So please go read this book. It's very short. Capitalist realism is essentially the commonly held idea that capitalism is the only viable economic system, that there is no alternative, as Thatcher said.
I'd put a stake through her heart and garlic round her neck to make sure she never come back.
Isn't that a pretty horrible thing to say when her funeral's going on right now?
Too bad, too bad.
We take for granted that the world we live in is the only world possible. Imagining a different future is widely seen as naive or childish, despite the fact that our economic reality is at best 50 years old. I see capitalist realism in our ideas of autonomy. We feel as though working for our entire lives in undemocratic companies with no personal control is the only option, or at least inevitable in some way. We've been conditioned to think that there is no alternative. When I started my job, this was exactly what I was running into. It was so taken for granted that we shouldn't have autonomy or any say over our working lives that I felt crazy thinking and feeling otherwise. When this is our daily experience, either from working a job, being financially restricted in some way, or running up against restrictive laws and oppressive systems, this lack of autonomy defines every part of our lives. So is it really any surprise that so many people are drawn to video games to allow themselves a feeling of control? And what game gives you more control than Minecraft? I wanted to talk about my port in this chapter specifically, because I felt like it was the best example of a place in my world being immersive. A villager used to live here, my cartographer villager, who managed to live for a fairly long time before repeatedly falling down the stairs. I think the level of immersion I find in this build comes from the amount of detail. There's just very little empty space. I also think it could be to do with the low ceilings and separating walls, which give the space a more lifelike scale. I love maps in Minecraft. They're obviously one of the best ways to add art to your walls, but I also just love the way they condense so much information into a cute little image like this. I suppose that's true for real maps too. I have a lectern by the desk where I wrote down imagined orders for the port's flower shop. It was fun to imagine which other buildings in the area would be buying flowers and why. There are a few other lecterns like this throughout my world that I wrote whenever I felt like adding a little history to my builds. I love to write stories and imagine worlds, and Minecraft is a great vehicle for that. It allows you to give narratives to a place and tell stories through the places themselves. Before I started this world, I was actually playing beta, with the mod pack Better Than Adventure, and one of the things I focused on in that beta world was trying to build a world connected by waterways. This is actually where my skin comes from. I wanted to be a seafarer, and although my new world is far more connected through rails, I've just stuck with that look. Better Than Adventure was a lot of fun. I do recommend it. It sanded off the rough edges of the beta versions to make it more accessible, and I did enjoy experiencing those versions, but I ultimately didn't stay with it. When I think back, I do think the feeling of immersion was stronger somehow in that version. Maybe it was the reduced block palette or just the lighting engine, but even pretty simple builds could have a strong sense of place. I moved on from that world directly to this one, just trying to remember to carry over the lesson of playing slower and appreciating the smaller moments. One of the ways I tried to slow down was fishing, which at first I did right here at this port. Fishing in this game has always been kind of boring, but I think that's why I enjoyed it so much. It's one of the most pointless and repetitive systems in the game. Outside of enchanted books, there's pretty much no reason to fish, other than a pretty mediocre food source that takes way too long to farm in large numbers. I even spent a little while daydreaming about a mod for the game to expand the fishing to include dozens of real and unreal fish, as well as weight and length stats, to give the player something to aim for in long fishing sessions. I was mainly thinking about the systems in Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley. I do think this would be really cool to make, not that I have any experience in developing mods, but I realised that it was actually the simplicity and repetitiveness that I had been appreciating. I realised a lot later on that I had been engaging in a sort of meditation without realising it, when I would sit at this pier, fish, and focus on the ambient sounds of the game and nothing else. The second thing I want to talk about that makes Minecraft so great is immersion. Immersion is a bit of a buzzword in the video game world. It's thrown around when talking about nearly any game with a world to explore. But there's a good reason for this. Immersion is a unique part of what makes games as a medium great. We can be immersed in other mediums, especially novels or concept albums, but being physically placed into an environment elevates video game immersion. Have you ever found yourself playing a game and reaching a flow state, where the TV or monitor drops away and the controller is replaced with pure movement? You stop thinking about mechanics and just experience the game. This can happen with any game, and not just those with environments. But I think immersion is a key part of Minecraft's appeal, since those environments you're immersed in are your own. To plan, design, and construct an environment that you can then go on to exist inside of is a unique experience that few pieces of media before Minecraft and before games have ever been able to capture. The reason this immersion speaks to us is for the same reason that we value autonomy. It's something that so many of us lack in our day-to-day lives. Do you remember that build you spent weeks working on? You had a sudden spark of inspiration after stumbling upon the perfect spot to build. You gathered the resources, cleared the area, and day by day you built a space that you loved. It was exactly how you wanted it to look, and it was all yours. You could fill it however you wanted and even share it with others. Having a space that's our own is important. Being able to shape your environment to fit your personal needs and wants is part of the joy of being a person, and so many of us lack it partially or entirely. Just like how Animal Crossing is a fantasy of home ownership and walkable communities, Minecraft becomes a fantasy of living in a space you love. It wasn't long ago that I'd moved into my first flat. I'm 2 flats divorced from that memory, but I still remember the warm September day when my dad drove a moving van halfway across the country, and I stepped out onto this new street I'd only seen in Rightmove images. It was liberating, and exciting, and terrifying, and I stayed in that studio flat for a week straight after my family left, living off of pesto pasta and watching the Overwatch League. Buying IKEA furniture and hanging paintings I bought years ago on rented walls felt like a freedom I'd been yearning for my whole life. I had always dreamed of my own home and garden, but this little flat was everything I needed, and I delighted in endlessly rearranging the sofa and bookshelves and obsessing over feng shui YouTube shorts until everything was just as I imagined. The next summer, I even started a little garden. I slowly learned how to grow tiny sweet vegetables while I added pot after pot to our front terrace. Later that year, our landlord increased the price of our rent, and we made the decision to move out, and with that, my little gardening experiment came to a sudden end. My potatoes and carrots were harvested, my bird feeder was given to family, and whatever was left was composted for houseplants. Not only do most of us not have full control over our lived environments, many of us live in rented accommodation that could slip away from us at any moment, while spending significant portions of our days working in an environment we have no control or ownership over whatsoever. Even outside of work, our public spaces are devoid of community design and plastered with advertising alongside roads or inside public transport. We often can't even escape this in our own homes. Our smartphones are locked to proprietary software, and our smart TVs place ads on their homepages. Even in the world of video games, this marketization of your attention is present. The most obvious example being Fortnite, and the way it's been presented as less of a game and more of a digital commerce platform akin to a social media site. Even more common are live service games using their user interface as opportunities to advertise cosmetic skins or online gambling. This is even present in supposedly immersive single-player games, like any open-world Ubisoft game pushing season passes or faux cryptocurrencies. Assuming you don't play on Bedrock and use an alternative launcher like Prism, Minecraft can present an alternative. I don't want to talk too much about advertising or gambling in games. That could be its own video entirely, and there are already plenty of those videos. But I do think it's the most malignant example of co-opting space in games for profit. So if immersion is so hard to come by in games and in the real world, what is unique about Minecraft, and what makes Minecraft's spaces so great? Minecraft creates a microcosm of our world, a simplified digital depiction of environments we interact with in our lives. While many games focus on one particular fantasized experience, such as shooting intelligent gorillas or playing impossibly high-scoring poker cards, Minecraft encourages us to build a home, and in that home, to build a place to sleep, and a place to eat, and a place to work. No wonder the spaces we build immerse us. They are a pixelated reflection of real things. I understand that this idea only holds true to a certain extent. No, the Iron Golem farm you built that relies on perpetually terrified villagers hopefully doesn't reflect any environment in your real life. But each player will, to a certain extent, build environments for themselves to live in. Environments whose only purpose is shelter. Castles are, in my opinion, the most iconic structures in Minecraft. I think this is in part because of the fact that they were almost immediately attainable, with only dirt and cobble in the very earliest versions of the game. The Misi rule of Minecraft is that every single playthrough of Minecraft, if played for long enough, will eventually culminate in an attempt at building a castle. I'm kind of terrible at focusing on projects, so I end up bouncing between areas quite frequently, and this castle is the best example of that. The walls were built entirely in one manic night, but everything else was added one at a time, and because of that you can see my building styles change over time. And I actually like how this reflects a real castle, with its 11th century walls and 13th century towers. The blacksmiths was the first build, and still one of my favourites. I love builds with small details. With any big project, I like to designate a sort of base for myself, and for the castle that was a blacksmith, with a cosy little room with a view of my main base. The Abbey was a later addition, which was inspired by the game Pentiment, which I definitely recommend if you enjoy late Middle Ages or role-playing games in general. Although I love the exterior, the Abbey does suffer from my habit of never finishing interiors. I have a board in this tower with all the builds I hope to complete one day that I've slowly been ticking off. The aim was to represent most of the occupations that you would have found in a sizable real medieval town. Although I wanted to represent some level of reality in the castle, I didn't want to too strictly adhere to realism. These crowded townhouses are the latest addition to the castle, outside of landscaping, and I really like how they look. In terms of shape, they're actually simpler than the previous houses, but the lack of depth is made up for by the texturing and palette. I love the crowded, colourful roofs, the textured stonework, and the cute little slit windows. Like I said, I do tend to lose focus and go work on other things quite easily, so this area isn't finished. The alleyways are mostly empty, but I still enjoy the space they create. It's quite evocative. Speaking of landscaping, that's what I tried to achieve out here. This used to be a big empty jungle pasture dotted with bushes and vines, but I got tired of that incongruous look and got terraforming. This was the first time that I really tried to create natural terraforming, and I went on to do more in my trading village, where I might have gone a little bit overboard. But I like how it came out here, with these little cliffs and winding paths drawing the eye through the composition. Even from very early in its history, Minecraft presented an opportunity to make stuff. The first thing that comes to mind is that video from 16 years ago of the USS Enterprise. I was 11 when I first saw this video, and didn't even know what Star Trek was, but I was in awe of it, and what was possible inside of a video game. Things have come far since 2011 though, so far in fact that I would argue that Minecraft has become more than just a game. It's become a vehicle for experiences, it's become an artistic medium. The newer versions of the game have massively increased the potential palette for builders. There are dozens of more blocks and far more opportunities to control compositions, colours and textures. Despite this, however, these versions of Minecraft can be controversial. For as many people who love the new features, there are people who miss the simplicity of a smaller palette. After all, isn't it limitation that fosters creativity? The problem with that view is that it isn't looking at a big enough picture. Compared to an earlier version of the game, we are drowning in building materials. But when you compare Minecraft to any other medium of art, you see that limitation is in fact a core part of the medium, and a key reason why its art is so compelling. I want to talk about a change in Minecraft building that's been widely credited to BOO, a YouTuber and builder who uses Minecraft's blocks to play with shape and colour in creative ways, in what I believe to be an art movement. BOO is a YouTuber known for his Hermitcraft videos and his series Building with BOO, but I was introduced to him through Etho and Mindcrack, the original Hermitcraft. There's a great video by Frostbite Freeman talking about why BOO might be the greatest Minecraft player of all time. That's not an argument I want to get into, but it's undeniable that he's been a massive influence on the game and what I would call Minecraft impressionism. It's Marlow has a video called Minecraft Building is Changing, which highlights this shift and discusses the popularization of this art movement. BOO's impressionism, which has spread far from just his personal style, is a recognizable movement in the style of Minecraft building. It is often lumped in disparagingly with what is called block vomit. Block vomit is often an unrefined attempt at this impressionistic look, where the builder lacks in subtlety, but the accusation is also often thrown at amazing builds, simply because the commenter lacks an appreciation or understanding of the style. The essential idea behind Minecraft impressionism is that blocks can and should be used not just as what they fill the role of in the game, but how they look, and as such, tree leaves can be terracotta and walls can be coral. Another recognizable principle of this movement is the use of complex colour palettes and gradients, which is where the accusation of block vomit often comes from. When used poorly, this technique can look chaotic, but when used right, it creates an incredible amount of depth in structures with relatively simple thought. I'm telling you all this because I think this discernible artistic movement that has developed over the past couple of years serves as evidence that Minecraft has in fact become a real medium, rather than just a tool for creativity. We can track artistic sensibility over time in a span of around a decade. Builds which were universally awe-inspiring in 2013 look dated to a builder in 2026, and I don't see why this evolution won't continue going forward. If we can see the evolution of an artistic sensibility, can we really deny that that constitutes a medium? This area is one of the most recent additions to the world, and currently acts as the end of my train line. The main thing that was on my mind when building this obelisk, which when I used to use Distant Horizons would have actually been visible all the way back at the start of this tour, was David Lynch. I wanted to build something that really played with the normal sense of scale in Minecraft, and David Lynch's dark, moody vibes were a big part of that. Lynch was one of my all-time favourite directors, and I'm still kind of obsessed with his work and his career.
It's December 16, 2022, and if you can believe it, it's a Friday once again.
I really recommend his autobiography, Room to Dream, if you're already a fan. If you're not already a fan, then go watch Twin Peaks. Just don't watch Inland Empire yet. I've never been great at building trees in Minecraft, despite loving them in real life. I find branches and leaves hard to place, especially when fighting with scaffolding. The colour of the tree matches the colour of the pipes connected to the obelisk. I like to imagine some horrifying black substance is either coming from the tree or infecting it. I enjoy not knowing which way around it is. The storage system is a design from Azumavoid. Copper golems are my favourite recent addition to the game. They're so cute, carrying items around, but I do feel a little bit guilty locking them in a 5-block line to endlessly sort my inventory spam. I wanted this area to feel barren, and I loved the colour of the savannas from the Vanilla Tweaks resource pack, so I went around cutting down nearly all of the acacia trees and getting rid of most of the wildlife. I've always liked buildings that showed off their insides, like elevators you can see through, or that famous French building with all the pipes on the outside. When I started building this area, I wanted to move far enough away from everything else to recapture a sense of freshness in the world. Spending hundreds and hundreds of hours building up one area populated with the same caves, rivers and hills made my world feel a little bit stale. I wanted to recapture some of the magic that Ennie Austin talked about in his video about Minecraft when generating a new world. Some of the mystery of an unexplored landscape, but I knew I didn't want to start a new world. I think that spending some time in a new area just meant that when I did return and work on projects back home, it felt fresh again. And now I bounce back and forth between the two areas, even if my focus is here right now. So Minecraft is the best game of all time, which means it must be perfect, right? Actually, there's a lot of things I would change if I was handed the lead designer position at Mojang. So to give the other side of the discussion, let's outline some issues with the game, which should hopefully give us a better understanding of what does work. I think beds should never have been added to the game, or at least never have allowed the player to skip the night. I said earlier in the video that what makes Minecraft so great is its freedom, but good freedom still requires friction. And most of the features I have issues with are ones that sand any friction off of the game. The need to design structures with the knight in mind meant extrinsic motivation in building. Building to achieve something specific, such as walls to keep out mobs, rather than building purely for the sake of building. Although I do love intrinsic building, I think it's healthy for the gameplay loop of Minecraft to have some gameplay-led motivation built in to encourage builds like bridges or railways, which relate to the next thing I would change. When I was playing beta Minecraft, one of the first things that hit me and made the old versions feel so different was not being able to run, especially after years of sprint jumping everywhere. But we don't just sprint now. A lot of us fly everywhere with elytra. Elytras are an incredible form of travel. They're fast and dynamic, and they require no planning or infrastructure. On top of that, they're just incredibly fun. Elytra are a little too good though. They are by far the best way to travel, and the only drawback is requiring rockets, which are fairly easy to farm. Because of this, all other forms of travel are redundant, meaning no need to ride horses or build railways. I've seen some people suggest iceboat travel, which is a lot faster than minecarts and elytra, but they still require a lot of planning and infrastructure, meaning that elytras are still usually the better option for most situations. Although these uses of elytra have allowed for playstyles and builds that wouldn't have been possible before 1.9, I do think they have ultimately been a net negative on the game for a few reasons. Firstly, similar to beds, making railways redundant has removed the extrinsic motivation to build rail systems, which you can probably tell are my favourite part of the game. Railways are an iconic staple of many Minecraft worlds and are part of having an interconnected world. With the inclusion of elytra, it's now more common to have disparate worlds only connected by a series of nether portals. I think this lack of connection leads to worlds lacking in emergent design, as players aren't pushed to new places by the need to create roads or railways. Another reason I think this hurts the game is the proliferation of a bird's eye view, something that was uncommon before 1.9. Rather than encouraging players to design environments to be experienced from the ground, it's become common to design builds to be viewed from above, which brings attention away from detailed building and considered lines of sight. This change has enabled the creation of megabases, which are undeniably impressive, but can often feel a bit hollow. One more thing I think Minecraft struggles with is ecology. Its worlds are fully interactable, but the animals within are effectively only able to be interacted with through breeding or extinction. As Minecraft mobs have no natural cycle of reproduction, deaths from players or even wolves will slowly but surely result in depopulation, which includes all of the interesting but vapid additions who were supposedly so uninteractive as to more accurately represent real-world ecology. I'm not entirely sure how a proper ecology system that isn't overly complicated could be implemented, but there's a great video by Clay Wright, which was the inspiration for this paragraph. I would love to see more lifelike ecology in the game, or even just the option to have pets wander around a designated home and interact with the world more. We're getting close to the end of the world tour now, so before I end the video, I want to quickly talk about a handful of other games that I think are great for similar reasons. If, like me, autonomy and immersion are big reasons you love games, you might enjoy these. I don't really want to talk about creativity in games here, because although there are other games that feature creativity as a core mechanic, like Townscaper or Summerhouse, that I love, I don't think any of them have transcended from fun, creative experiment to full artistic medium in the way that Minecraft has. I'm also just not going to give you a long list of sandbox games, because I feel like that would be a little redundant. Classic World of Warcraft is probably not what you were expecting, but it is a game I love for its immersion, despite not being a traditional MMO fan. I think classic WoW, with its gorgeous low-poly environments that are completely interconnected with real-time player-shared transportation, is one of the best examples of video game immersion, and it was made in 2004. One of my least favourite game mechanics is fast travel. It pulls you out of the world and detaches you from any sense of scale. Classic WoW is a perfect example of why this is important. I've never played a game that felt as big as Classic WoW, despite having played games that were objectively much larger. It is the construction of WoW's worlds that make them feel expansive, with all the distinct and memorable areas clumsily blending into one another, and the large oceans separating the continents. As someone who doesn't know how to or really has any desire to play WoW properly, I enjoy how slow and meditative the game can be. You might say grindy instead of meditative, but I think making progress take a long time helps to immerse you into that world, as well as making leveling feel meaningful. The more time you're forced to spend in an area, the more real it will feel, and the more significant it will feel when you leave, and therefore the bigger the world will feel once that place is a distant, tiny memory. I could have talked about any number of RPGs here, but I had to choose one, so I went with Disco Elysium. Right at the start of the video, we talked about how role-playing games bridge the gap between narrative and interaction by allowing us to influence the story through our choices. Disco Elysium embraces role-playing and choices so thoroughly that it ditches any other kind of gameplay entirely, acting almost as an interactive novel, and a great novel too. If you're watching an hour-long video essay about games as art, I doubt I need to tell you that Disco Elysium is a great game, but it really is. The choices you make and the things you choose to say impact not only the plot of the game, like many RPGs, but also the protagonist's character development and personality, adding another dimension to what an RPG can reflect back at you. So that was a world tour. I don't think I've covered everything, but we've seen most of what I wanted to share, and explored what I think are the most important reasons why Minecraft is so great. I want to end this video by saying Minecraft is a game I've grown up with, and it's one I've loved. There are other games I've loved over that time, but Minecraft is the only one I've come back to over and over again. And each time I come back, the game is a little different, and so am I. Each time I've played, I've learned something new about the world, and something new about myself. And that, to me, is art. I know I went on a lot of tangents in this video, but I hope I've raised a lot of things to think about, and if you do have any thoughts, I'd love if you'd let me know below. Thank you if you made it all the way to the end of the video. This is the first video I've made, and it was a real labour of love. If you can't tell, I'm quite passionate about Minecraft. I wanted this to feel less like an essay and more like an info dump with plenty of tangents and open questions. It's been super fun to share my world, which is something I've worked on for so long. I've linked all the videos I mentioned in the video down below, so please go watch those.